So, welcome, my dear co-instructors, Dr. Himanshu, Dr. Purendra, Dr. Chitra. Dr. Abhay is having his own IC at the same time, but he would be joining us for his talk. So he'll definitely be contributing. And we are looking forward to an excellent session. And I think I have a fantastic faculty who have great experience in dealing with all the premium cataract surgery. I believe the premium cataract surgery is a bit of a misnomer today in the sense that every patient deserves a premium outcome. And that's what they expect. That's what, as ophthalmologists of third millennium, we need to deliver. And this is not just what you do into the operating microscope or what you kind of intraocular lens you put, but it's a whole process. And to take you through this process, we start with Dr. Purendra Bhasin, who will be talking about counseling and preoperative workup. I think setting standards, setting expectations is extremely important. And I can't think of anyone else than my dear friend Purendra from Gwalior, who's not just an ophthalmologist, but an entrepreneur managing a huge hospital, a multi-speciality hospital. So if he can't set expectations right, I don't think any one of us in Airways can. Over to you, Purendra.
Thank you, Dr. Ramamurthy, and for the excellent course which you have designed, and for inviting me, for giving me this opportunity, and for the good introduction of mine. I will be sharing my screen now, and can you see the screen, please? Is my screen visible?
Yes, it's visible. It's visible.
Thank you. So I don't have any financial interest in this, whatever has been shown over here. And I will be speaking on counseling and pre-operative workup for excelling in premium cataract surgery. So it's not a premium IOL, but definitely all the surgeries are premium nowadays, and they are in the category of refractive surgery. So, but to be more precise and to focus on the specific kind of lenses or specific kind of surgery, usually it includes a presbyopia correcting IOL, like multifocal, bifocal, trifocals, astigmatic correcting IOLs, like toric IOL, and combination of these like toric multifocal IOL. And it has now gained increasing popularity because the number of patients are asking for such IOLs have increased tremendously, because a lot of cases have come enrolled into the public, and now more surgeons are prepared to implant because they have excelled in their surgical technique, and they all have these gadgets available with them that they are prepared to implant mentally and clinically also to these premium cataract surgeries. Essentials are that we should understand the expectation of our patient. This is one of the primary thing which has to be addressed and which has to be seen. A careful patient examination, not the ocular examination alone is required. We should look for any systemic condition. We should look at the gait of the patient, head position, and contralateral eye. Everything has to be seen. And a proper patient counseling, this is the key for the success in any premium surgery. A complete preoperative workup should be done. A careful patient history should be elicited. What is the previous history? What is the systemic history? What has been there? Is there any history of trauma or anything else? Everything should be elicited and should be taken into account. We should look at the age of the patient. Younger the patient, the problem of glare halos are more, and they get annoying effect due to this, and maybe at times in younger patients we have to explant. If your counseling is improper in younger age group patient, then it becomes sometimes it becomes difficult, and initially you should not address the younger age group patient for a multifocal IOL surgery in your initial period of practice. In males, it is because they are more prone to outdoor activities. So the females, housewives, are the better candidates to start with the premium surgeries. And profession. If they have a driving profession or a profession which they are not dependent on the driver or the chauffeur, or some of the officers, they always have a chauffeur. Even at young age, we can suggest these multifocal bifocal IOLs. We should always underpromise and exclude patients with some unrealistic expectations. And lastly, we should discuss the potential downside associated with these premium IOLs to the patients beforehand. A complete ocular examination of both eyes is mandatory. Corneal topography, Placido and sham fluke imaging should be done. Tear film assessment and meibomian gland assessment, all this should be taken care of and seen thoroughly before taking the patients for surgery. Now, a new normal is to do OCT macula in all these cases, and I do it whenever the media permits, or maybe we can do it for the other eye. Check for glaucoma and other optic nerve abnormalities, IOL power calculation, keratometry, and axial length measurement, and using the right formula for the specific patient in high or low powers specifically. Do keratometry on nascent or untouched corneas. Or you can call the patient again if you are having some doubt. When measurements differ between two devices, do a third measurement with another device, or you can repeat on the same device which you are having. If you don't have a third device, on a later date, maybe we can do it with Verion, we can do it with Pentacam, we can do it the IOL power calculation with other machine, and keratometry with other machines. Do not proceed if there are discrepancies in axis and magnitude. And inadequate tear film can impact preoperative measurements and visual outcomes. So this has to be kept in mind. Optimize ocular surface before ordering an IOL, specific IOL, and planning the surgery. Planning multifocal IOL in dense cataract is a challenge. We should look for any history of systemic disease or any trauma. Bilateral IOL power calculation should be done in all these select cases to avoid amblyopia. Other eye fundus and OCT examination if it is possible. Type of cataract, if it is hypermature with shallow anterior chamber, we should anticipate the proper IOL position. This might change in such cases. So the IOL power calculation varies in such cases. Be doubly sure of the IOL power to plan multifocal IOL in such an eye. Tear film assessment, look at the dry eye, do the Placido test and look for the meibomian gland dysfunction, as I said earlier. Epithelial basement dystrophy should be treated, or in such cases, we should avoid Salzmann nodule. One on the right side is a confluent nodule, and similar corneal opacities, if they are present, peripheral degeneration or pterygiums, all these things, even a small pterygium at the periphery can change the Myers and induce astigmatism. New normal OCT macula. I remember many cases which I have not done IOL because they had ERM, they had early ARMD, they had the early CME. This is interesting case with the rule astigmatism. Usually the posterior corneal surface has the opposite astigmatism than the anterior corneal surface. In this particular case, both the anterior and posterior corneal surface, they were having with the rule astigmatism, which was unusual, and we decrease the with the rule astigmatism usually as per the norm. But in this particular case, so what I meant to say is the proper calculation of the posterior corneal curvature and the power is very, very helpful. Actual calculation is helpful in selecting the right patient and avoiding this surprises post-operatively. Counseling in all sense should be done before the surgery. Explain possible conversion to routine monofocal or non-toric IOL in challenging cases like advanced hard-brown cataract, etc. Explain associated risk in posterior polar cataract cases, pseudoexfoliation, corneal opacity, uveitis, or any history of trauma, whether ocular or any head trauma. With a mature or dense cataract, when we are not able to ascertain or see the retina properly. So these things should be taken into account, and counsel inform the patient beforehand. A written consent should be taken, information should be given in writing. That is very, very helpful in court of law also, because patients forget all these things which has been counseled before when they come again. Avoid multifocal IOL in diabetic retinopathy. retinal veno occlusion cases, ARMD, maculopathies, retinitis pigmentosa, choroiditis, etc. Family counsel might be appropriate, and it is necessary to encourage questions from and ask beforehand. Meeting of a surgeon with the patient before surgery and during our surgery also, if you discuss or talk to the patient, is the call. Conclude just 10 seconds more. Post-operative surprises are avoided, patient satisfaction increases, and grievances avoided by proper patient selection, complete pre-operative counseling, and always be firm to say no when patient's ocular condition is against, but patient is willing for premium IOL. Be prepared to address any residual refractive errors. Thank you.
Can you stop there?
Yes, sir.
Thank you so much, Purendra. I mean, I think that was a very comprehensive coverage of what needs to be done preoperatively. As it is often said, time spent preoperatively pays off in a big way, in the sense that postoperatively you end up being apologetic. You know, if you counsel the patient, if you have made them understand the limitations of what you're doing, then obviously, even if you end up with a less than optimal result, the patients are more accepting of that. Any comments from you, Himanshu?
Yeah, no, I'm going to come to that. A lot of it that I'm going to be covering up in my talk, patient expectations, and so I'll come to that soon.
Right, right. Chitra, you have anything to say?
Oh, no.
Okay, I think my talk sort of sinks into what Purendra had said. Let me just share my slides.
Anyway, biometry has to be the second talk only.
Yeah, but that you have to speak in detail.
Yeah.
Tell us in detail about.
Correct.
Yeah, don't worry. I would ask the questions after that.
So do not intimidate. This is not the platform to.
You are able to see my screen? Oh, you're able to see my screen now?
Yes, yes.
Okay. So, Purendra gave a very nice overview of checking up with the ocular surface, setting patient expectations, checking the macula, and a lot of other things, not only with the patient, with the whole family, that you need to do before taking up the patient for cataract surgery. But once the decision has been taken to go for a premium intraocular lens, the most important aspect is to do a perfect biometry, because it's a classical case of garbage in, garbage out. If you are excellent cataract surgery done with the best of machinery, best of intraocular lenses, but if your basic measurement of the lens power or the toricity is wrong, obviously it is going to get suboptimal outcomes. And if there is a requirement for glasses, if there's a poorer quality of vision, wrong asphericity, then obviously the patient is not going to be happy. So accurate measurements and subsequently calculation with the right formula is extremely important. I think this is a slide which is worth repeating. That is, every millimeter of error in the axial length calculation leads to a 3 diopter error in the intraocular lens power. This is for the average eyes, which are in the range of about 22 to 24.5 millimeters. But in case you have a long eye, then, so for example, if you're putting a plus 10 diopter or a plus 8 diopter, the good news is these eyes are a little more tolerant towards errors, in the sense every millimeter leads to an error of only 1.75 diopters. When an extremely short eye like a plus 30 diopter, every millimeter would lead to almost a 3.75 diopter error in the intraocular lens power calculation. You don't have to memorize this. It just stands to reason. It's logic, in the sense that if you have a smaller power intraocular lens, the overall axial length itself is going to be long, and every error is going to be a smaller percentage of the overall length. So that's the reason it has a less of an impact. But in a short eye, if you are making an error, obviously the error it's going to translate into a much bigger error in the intraocular lens power calculation. Today, with the latest advances in ocular biometry, it's more and more realized that the challenge is not really in the calculation of the axial length. We have excellent biometers which are able to give us almost repeatably the correct axial length. There are means of checking and cross-checking and verifying it. But the keratometry is the challenge most often. And remember, each 1 diopter error in average K leads to 1 diopter error in the IOL power calculation. This is a slide I think I've been using for almost 15 to 17 years, but it's worth looking at it again. I am sure some of my younger colleagues, younger friends are there listening in. And I believe applanation A scan is something that you need to give up completely. It's possible that you are still not reached a stage of practice where you can afford an optical biometry, but though it's a good investment. Just in case you have still doing an A scan, please remember when you indent the cornea with an applanation A scan, irrespective of the experience that you have, irrespective of the confidence you have, the kind of flattening of the cornea that you create is not repeatable, and it can lead to an error of almost 0.24 millimeters. And as we saw in the last slide, this could lead to an error of almost a diopter of error in the calculation of the power. The immersion A scan is somewhat better because there's no contact with the cornea, but that again has almost 10 times the greater error than an optical biometer. So just in case you're planning to, you have to choose between upgrading from a basic phaco machine to a higher end phaco machine and or buying an optical biometer, I would any day recommend that you go for an optical biometer, because you're still used to doing good cataract surgery with the moderate trained machine. But if you get your biometry results accurate, I assure you, my dear friends, that you will be able to afford your higher end phaco machine much faster. And these are the range of machines that we have. Optical biometers, it's always good to have the freedom of choice. Whenever there's competition, prices do come down. And all these are based upon excellent technology, though the Swepsos OCT seems to have a slight precedence over the others. And please remember, all these machines will give you the axial length and will give you the keratometry readings, which are quite reliable. Please go for a machine which gives you also the lens thickness. If it gives you the AC depth and the white to white, that's it should also give you the AC depth, definitely as a third parameter. If it gives you the lens thickness and the white to white, that's also a good way to go, for the simple reason that that would allow you to incorporate most of the more recent formula, which require all these 5 parameters to be brought in. So AC depth, apart from axial length, and keratometry is extremely important when you're choosing these machines. And just because you get the best of machines doesn't mean that you will always end up with excellent results. I'm just showing you this simple example. This is taken on an IOL Master 700. And as you can see over here, these are 2 different readings taken subsequently in the same eye of the same patient with the same examiner. Because the fixation is perfect and it's possible to verify it with most optical biometers, you find that the difference between the 2 readings is just 10 microns in the axial length, and it's 0.02 diopters as far as the keratometry is concerned. And that's the reason the 2 subsequent readings almost give you exactly the same intraocular lens power of plus 15 diopters. But let's take another example. The other eye of the patient, the same examiner, but the fixation is not accurate. You can see that the foveal pit is not visible. Mind you, we often say the optical biometers are idiot-proof simply because you can get away with the substandard measurements, but it's not entirely true. Maybe it doesn't require the expertise or the experience for an immersion biometry, but then errors can happen. And in a situation like this, what you see is that there is a 190 micron difference in the axial length, a 0.5 diopter difference in the keratometry, and what it can translate almost into diopter of difference in the intraocular lens power calculation between 15 and 16 diopters. So optical biometer is a good machine to have. It's reliable, it's reproducible, but at the same time, it also requires attention to detail, and it's extremely important that you do that. And as far as when do you think that something is wrong and you need to verify your measurements, whether it is with the optical biometer or with the immersion A scan, and always measure both eyes in every patient. Even if one eye has been operated for cataract years back, go ahead and measure that eye, simply because you will get a more good axial length to compare some idea about the keratometry also. Repeat measurements if the difference between the axial length between the 2 eyes is more than 0.3 millimeters, because that would be at least a 1 diopter difference in the intraocular lens power calculation, unless there is documented evidence of anisometropia prior to the surgery. if the axial length, most of the eyes, as I already mentioned, 90% of the eyes worldwide fall within the axial length range of 22 to 25 millimeters. Just in case you get beyond these two limits, then again, that's something reason for you to verify. An axial length measurement does not correlate with the refraction. The patient has never worn myopic glasses and you get a plus 15 diopter IOL power. Obviously, it's possible sometimes when the keratometry and the axial length play against each other. So you cannot completely counter that, but then it's definitely a reason for you to look more closely into what you're measuring. And in case you're doing an immersion A scan and you're not getting a correctly positioned, high, steeply rising echoes, then it's extremely important that you have, and problems with patient cooperation or fixation is there, then again, you need to look into it. Barrett 2 IOL formula is the gamut of formula that is available, but I'm going to stick to one single formula simply because it's available, it's universal, it can take care of most of your refractive cataract surgery needs, and we use it across all our centers, whether we have an optical biometer or not. The Barrett Universal 2 is the core formula, which is at the heart of every other formula. And from this is derived, which gives you basically the spherical intraocular lens power. The Barrett toric calculator is what we use for toric intraocular lens power calculation. The TrueK formula is what we use for post-laser vision correction eyes, whether it's myopia, hyperopia, post-radial keratotomy, with or without the refractive history being available. The Barrett TrueK toric calculator is the one which we use for toric calculations, toric intraocular lens calculation if you are implanting in a post-refractive surgery scenario. The Barrett RX formula, in case you are implanted a toric intraocular lens and you get a suboptimal outcome as far as the correction of the toricity or even the spherical area concern, you have the options to rotate or exchange or put in a piggyback. This formula will enable you to do that. And the Barrett Universal, basically, as I mentioned already, requires, like most other modern fifth generation formula, the axial length, the keratometry, the optical anterior chamber depth, the lens thickness, the white to white, and most importantly, it takes into consideration the profile and the thickness of the intraocular lens implanted. In all other formula, when you're talking about lens thickness, it refers to the thickness of the cataractous lens which you're going to take out. This is the only formula which takes into account the profile and the thickness of the intraocular lens, whether it's a biconvex, concavo-convex, or a meniscus lens, and that's the reason it becomes a little more accurate. The other new phenomenon that's available to us today is the ability to measure posterior corneal curvature and the anterior corneal curvature and have a total keratometry values. It's available with the IOL Master. It's possible with the Pentacam, but then that's the reason you have other iterations of this formula called the Barrett TK Universal, Barrett TK Toric, Barrett TK TrueK, etc. Suffice it to say that if you're examining normal eyes, whether the posterior corneal curvature is measured or it's assumed or mathematically calculated, the intraocular lens power calculation is good. But just in case you have a post-refractive surgery scenario, because the cornea has already been flattened out and the relationship of the anterior and posterior cornea is somewhat disturbed, these are the situations where an exact measurement of the posterior cornea might be useful. You may or may not practice multifocal intraocular lenses, but astigmatic lenses, toric correction has come to. I'll take a couple of minutes. I'm aware of this. Please stop. Posterior corneal astigmatism is something we have from the Doc Cox lecture. We have learned that it's extremely important. It's most often against the rule in about 85% of the eye. So that's something that's taken into consideration. The surgically induced astigmatism, even today, I find that many people key in a figure of 0.3, 0.4 diopters. We realize that surgically induced astigmatism has a centroid value. It has both a direction and a magnitude, and it is more in the range of about 0.1 diopter. So that is what you key in your formula. And something like a Barrett Universal formula already takes this into consideration. Toricity ratio is a correction that you get on the corneal plane depending upon the basic intraocular lens power that you're implanting. If you're implanting a plus 30 diopter lens, the amount of toricity you need in the intraocular lens for correcting the same 1 diopter on the corneal plane is much less, and that's something which is taken into consideration. Sorry?
Yes, sir. Just because the time is up, automatically the screen sharing got start.
No,
But you can continue. You can go ahead.
but I have to open my presentation, I think.
No, you can do the screen sharing.
Actually, it's important that they do that. Otherwise, the program would not have been so organized.
Yeah, you can just share your screen once again, sir.
Please share.
आप शेयर कर सकते हैं रामू मूर्ति जी सर.
सीधा शेयर करता हूँ.
सर वहीं पे आप प्रेजेंटेशन ऑन किया है, उसके
Okay.
बाद गो टू शेयर स्क्रीन और शेयर कीजिए वही प्रेजेंटेशन.
Okay.
फ्रॉम द सेम स्लाइड यू कैन डू दैट.
Okay.
सर ये ऑटो सेटअप है तो हो जाता है ये.
I'm not getting it.
Why you, AOS, you haven't put it in a group? Why?
सर पहले स्लाइड शो ओपन कर लीजिए सर.
हाँ जी. हाँ.
ओपन द स्लाइड शो देन यू शेयर द स्क्रीन, सो इट विल बी इजी फॉर यू.
What's happening?
Chitra, Dr. Ramamurthy really mentioned important point, which formula to use. Optical biometry, almost a mandatory. Dr. Bhasin, am I right? What you're saying was
What is important? Optical?
optical biometry, absolutely mandatory for
Mandatory.
whenever you're doing any
Yes.
kind of toric lens and or any lens implantation. And he
Yeah,
said,
yeah.
so, with no uncertain word, he said, don't buy a new phaco machine if you don't have the money. If you have to weigh between a new phaco machine and optical biometry, go ahead for optical
Go
biometry.
ahead further.
Yes, but if there are some young people in this audience who have an immersion biometer, what they could do is they could feed in the data into the Barrett's online, which is available. And of course, Ramurthy is going to continue.
I'm sorry, I'm aware of that time. I'm very conscious of it. But we have just 6 lectures of 8 minutes or 48 minutes. So I thought this was an important topic.
No problem, sir. You can
Go ahead,
continue.
go ahead,
It's just
continue.
a system.
Okay.
Yeah.
So toricity ratio. And as you can see, I'm just going to give you some examples. This is a preoperative IOL master reading that you're seeing. And the patient underwent uneven full trifocal implant. Actually, this was the time when the trifocals are just coming into the market. And the patient has a astigmatism of 0.87, quite cost conscious. So I just put in a trifocal implant, not bothering to correct the toricity. So I ended up with this refractive outcome where the near vision was reasonably good, but this patient just had a mixed astigmatism, but his uncorrected visual acuity was 6/18. He was an extremely unhappy patient. The patient was actually known to me for many years. So I could discuss with him, tell him that this is a residual error that is left over, and we'll wait for 3 months and do a laser vision correction for that. But in between, he had so much confidence in me that he said, let's go ahead and address the other eye, which had almost exactly the same toricity. And we went ahead and put a T3 toric intraocular lens in this, toric trifocal lens in this. And what we ended up in this patient was absolute emmetropia as far as distance near and intermediate is concerned. So it's extremely important that irrespective of what lens you put in, the cylinder be addressed, and it becomes even more important when it comes to multifocal intraocular lenses. And in case you leave cylinder uncorrected, then that is a pure definite prescription for unsatisfied patients. And in case we always have this rule that as soon as the patient walks in and is interested in a cataract surgery, we put the patient on the Barrett toric calculator on the optical biometer and make sure that the patient is not a candidate for toric intraocular lens, because our entire motivation, our entire counseling the patient depends on this. Just in case we are convinced the patient for a multifocal intraocular lens, then we find the patient has significant against the rule astigmatism. We don't want to be going back in again and counseling for a toric multifocal or downgrading to a toric lens. So we first do the measurements and then start counseling the patient. On the other hand, again, you have to understand that with the rule and against the rule astigmatism are two different entities. Here you can see almost a similar amount of with the rule astigmatism, but what the calculator tells you is a non-toric intraocular lens. Often the question comes in that whether there have been the youngsters who have been telling me they don't do much of premium intraocular lenses simply because they don't have an optical biometer. It's a chicken and egg situation. Maybe you can afford an optical biometer once you've done high-end cataract surgeries, and you can have more confidence in doing high-end cataract surgeries if you have an optical biometer. So obviously, you need to make sure that you do not wait for acquiring an optical biometer before going on to starting premium intraocular lenses. You can go on to these APISRS websites, or ASCRS websites, and all these formula are eminently available to you for your usage. So in summary, optical or immersion biometry is the way to go. If you can afford it, optical would be the best way. And the latest generation intraocular lens power formula is to be used. And my recommendation is to stick to a single suite of formulas as the Barrett formula. And with these few words, I must say, today, Metropia for all, not just for your premium cataract surgery patients, is a very definite possibility. Thank you so much. I'm sorry I exceeded the time, but
Yeah, we needed to know all that. So,
any questions from anybody? Any one of you?
so no, as I was earlier telling, that we should ensure that these patients, the immersion measurements they take and they enter it in the biometry, online calculator of Barrett's, either APCRS or ASCRS, and then they need to just write their IUL constant, which is acoustic constant, which will be different, which has to be mentioned, and they get to do well enough. It may not be as bang on as the optical biometry, but that is definitely a way to go. Who's going to be the next speaker?
I think we'll take Dr. Himanshu now, who's going to be talking about Abhay. I'm sure will be joining very soon. He said he'll come around 4:15. So we'll have Himanshu, who's going to be talking about managing patient expectations. I think if he can't manage patient expectations, nobody else can, because he's a ophthalmologist for the stars. I think the most demanding patients of the world come to him, and he has an extremely successful, scientific, and very precise practice in cataract and refractive surgery. And it's always a great learning experience to listen to my good friend Himanshu Mehta from Mumbai. Over to you, Himanshu.
Thank you, Dr. Ramamurthy. Thank you very much. Wonderful talk that we listened to you. I think basic, no high fundas, no trying to show any impressive videos, but absolute funda to a successful surgery and doing A-scan biometry and the right formula available online, which is free of charge. You know, your IOL Master, even the latest one, may not have the updated ones. None of the new machines may have the updated ones, but it's free of charge, available online. Fantastic. And managing patient expectation is the worst thing to do. What we have done as cataract surgeons over a period of time is we have undermined ourselves phenomenally. कुछ नहीं होता है, no pain, no injection, no time, 5 minutes में हो जाएगा. Don't worry, you can go home, no putty, nothing. Whereas the cardiac surgery, patient knows one tube here, one tube there, one tube here, lying down on the ICU bed for 3 months. He's even forgotten that he had a heart. But here by evening, if they don't see their WhatsApp, you are not a good surgeon. And this is what has happened, unfortunately, that yes, we have raised our bar phenomenally, but we have raised the expectations to a very high level. And that has put us in a catch-22 position. Because despite somebody not paying you and wanting a monofocal, as you said, not wanting a premium lens also, they all expect that. And despite, of course, having hypermetropia, myopia, astigmatism, vitreous hemorrhage, bad retina, they all expect post-surgery, they'll be seeing as good as the neighbor or better than that. And this is where premium or no premium, there is nothing premium left. Every surgery is premium. So there is no such thing as a problem without a gift for us in its hands. We seek problems because we need those gifts. So it's very important that all those of us who are doing it is because we have progressed to a level where we are ready to take challenges and risk. And nothing was explored in this world without taking risk. Many don't value the importance of premium IOL. Don't waste your time. I am a total multifocality guy. I mean, I always say that patient expects to do everything after the surgery, to do everything without glasses. But however, having said that, there are a few patients where you don't talk about premium lens at all. If they don't value the lens and they value their cell phone and iPhone more than that, don't waste your time on them. If they value their Ferrari more than that, I'm surprised. A side mirror of a BMW broken can cost them 300,000 bucks. They're ready to spend that. It's a depreciable asset. But when it comes to the eye surgery, we have to be thoughtful and we have to be sorry to say that ये lens थोड़ा महंगा है. And you have to tell them that no, this patient, that yes, this will be costing so much. I'm sorry, but this is what it will give. I'm not selling lenses. I'm not in the business of selling lenses at all. What I'm trying to do is to give patient the best possible vision with the best scientific understanding and do the best surgery as possible to help them get rid of their glasses as much as I can. So counseling, as Dr. Ramamurthy touched earlier, less pre-op chair time equal to more chair time pre-op, post-op. So if every relative who wants to come and meet me, I call them together. If there is only one person, I do not finalize the surgery. As I said again and again and again, and as you said, premium surgery that I have to look into, I invite best of the best. All of them should sit together, make a conscious decision. Finally, they'll put it on you. Doctor, आप बोलो कौन सा lens डालना चाहिए? No way, don't fall into the trap, because then finally they are going to catch you for that. Of course, you suggest positive suggestions. The power of suggestions is there. They will understand that, but the word should come from their mouth. That is very important. So as I said, sell iPhone or your phone, Samsung phone, which has to be thrown away in 1 or 2 years, to them is more important than their IOL, which is cheaper than that. And IOL will last for the rest of your life. And you can buy the Apple company or the Samsung company if you have the capacity to buy with your eyes. But still, people's priorities are wrong, and we have to justify the cost of a lens, which I'm not for. I disassociate myself from the money part to it. So, as I said, depreciable, a Ferrari or a BMW is very important to them, unlike the value. So, if they don't value your surgery, if they don't value you as a surgeon, and if they value the lens more, they do not deserve any mercy. That's it, period. Sorry, my words may be hard, but do it to them, that you don't deserve to put this lens. Go back to old rudimentary technology, 30 years back, put a monofocal. How do I care? That's the answer. So counseling, honesty, clarity of answers, no ambiguity, look into their eyes and tell. So counseling. This is the most important part in the whole story. So you want happy patients, results exceeding expectations. So under promise, over deliver. Dr. Bhasin also said the same thing. So you want a happy patient, goal achieved. That is what you want the patient to tell you, and that's what helps you. Even a poor patient will be more than happy to tell you that when they are happy. Under promise, over deliver, undervalue their surgery and its importance. They generally undervalue our surgery and its importance. Challenges are there. What is right? What is wrong? There is a thin line or Lakshman Rekha between the right and the wrong of life. Here it is. You have done all technology. You've done a wonderful surgery for the patient. You've done all smooth sailing. You have enjoyed it. You have been flawless in the whole thing. But the patient is unhappy. You will realize that despite doing a wonderful job in a brown cataract, excellent results, toric lens, you have got your Varian going, you have done your LensX, you've done every possible thing to see that you've done the best possible result. But there are some of those cribbers who will never be happy with you. And so do not use, they don't deserve it. So patients with high myopia, very high-end myopia, as Dr. Ramamurthy was saying, or high hypermetropia, wherein you will have problems in calculation. Like I had a plus 56 diopter lens. First, difficult to get it manufactured. Two, to get the exact power for these patients. No way, you could always be off by quite a big target. So that, and how you have to see how the first eye behaves for you to plan the second eye surgery. So you have to be careful when a patient needs a 2 diopter, 3 diopter, or minus diopter lens. You cannot use a multifocal of that kind. You have to tell them. So the outliers are the ones which are a problem. Again, 90% of them fall into any one of these formulae. You can use the Hoffer-Q for the high hypermetropes, or you can use the Haigis-L for your post-refractive surgery. But IOL formulae outliers are the ones which are the problem. You will have to find multiple ways in which you can get to near normality. So post-refractive surgery patients, always a problem. Because as Dr. Ramamurthy was saying, anterior cornea, posterior cornea, if there has been a lot of difference between the measurement of the anterior and the posterior cornea, you don't have Schlemm plug imaging, you don't have the thickness of the lens, because of course TrueK, TK by Barrett is a brilliant formula that you can put a toric. Now all these are post-refractive surgery patients are used to multifocality. They don't want to wear glasses. And I, in my practice, tell even the best of the best patient who puts a best multifocal lens or a trifocal lens, or whichever that you have, that 90-95% of your waking time, you will end up not using glasses. But I promise you, you'll never be 0-0, and you will need glasses. Whether you use it or not is a different story. So that is something which we have to do, and especially post-refractive, the amount of light dispersion, and you have the asphericity, which is what you have to take into consideration. You rather not use a multifocal in such patient. One-eyed patient, of course, extremely difficult. You have to just save the vision, and you have to be very clear about that. And of course, all the retina, wet ARMD, diabetic retinopathy, optic atrophy, you don't want to have any macular problems. You don't want to have ERM, wherein you use a multifocal lens. Angle kappa, that's something which a topography machine that you must be able to measure. If you have a large angle kappa, you are not good. The patient is not going to be happy with the multifocality, because not the first ring, but the second, third ring might be in the line of control. And that is not the best thing that you can do. Another 30-40 seconds, doc. In eyes with small angle kappa, fovea centric. Yeah. Less than 1 minute. I'll be there for that. Is that okay, Dr. Ramurthy? Yeah, okay. So centric may pass through the central ring of the multifocal eye. In eyes with large angle kappa, fovea centric ray may hit on the edge of the ring, causing edge glare and deterioration of the quality of vision. Excessive nighttime drivers. Yes, with LED lights and the newer lights, it is very difficult. So if you're putting a multifocal lens with the rings, if you're putting the Mini-Well or something which has nothing, or the eye hands, you don't have a problem. But if you're using with rings, multifocality, any of these multifocal lenses, Synergy or Symphony and or your Alcon Panoptic, you may have glares and halos that the patient will complain. Night driving, especially on the highway, can become difficult for them. People into the business of engineers, they have very specific angles, and they are not the best patients. I have had patients who have been on LED business. They have to show lights at dark lights in their offices at night to clients. Well, they are not going to be happy with light glare picking up. And snooker players, if they look from an angle, they are not very happy with it. And of course, you have those depressed cribbers who crib about everything. They'll crib, I went to this doctor, he told me this. I went to that doctor who told me this. I went to so-and-so, this told me this. Well, when there are cribbers, they are going to crib after you also. Remember one thing, if somebody comes and complains and badmouths some other doctor to me, I'm very, very, very clear that I will not open my mouth. And I know, because he'll go and badmouth me also outside. So hypocritical, unrealistic expectation, excessive complaint about is Dr. Abhay Vasavda there? I can't see him. The moment he comes, let me know. I will wind up my session. Dr. Bhasin, I think, just let me know. Those with excessive complaints about their glasses, contact lens prescriptions, those who complain far outweigh their actual visual problem. मुझे कुछ भी नहीं दिखता है. You realize, Dr. Bhasin, that sometimes patient के मुझे कुछ नहीं दिखता है. And then suddenly you realize, ask them, they can see everything. नहीं सब दिखता है. लेकिन newspaper, Economic Times, I can't read. So actually what he meant was that I can't read my Economic Times, but I can see everything. But to the family, he conveys that I can't see anything. And that's where your problem starts. So you don't have, they are cribbers. Those who are happy wearing glasses. Oh, there are quite a few patients who are very happy wearing glasses. But I'll give you a outlier on that also. Despite them being happy wearing glasses, after surgery, they subconsciously don't want to wear glasses because all their friends are not wearing glasses. Those who want guarantees, oh, of course, they are out of question. They walk out. There is no guarantee. Be wary of those OCD people, obsessive compulsive guys. They are so specific. They come with a big history. They have written down every small note of their life everywhere. People on multiple antidepressants and antipsychotic, anti-anxiety medications. You should be careful with using any of these good lenses. Do not take this technology light. Better not to do a job than be shoddy. No perfect IOLs born. As I say in my talk, there was no perfect sunny day. There was no perfect father, mother. There was no perfect brother, sister, or a cousin born. And of course, there was no perfect spouse born. So also there is no perfect lens born. We will have newer and newer technologies to tell us. But human body is very resilient, and most often than not, we get used to what we are into. So patients are still happy. My old Restore patients 15 years back also are quite happy, if they want to remain happy. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think he has not yet come. So I start my talk then.
Very nice talk, Dr. Himanshu. I really appreciate everything has been so vividly explained. And everything, if it is explained to the patient beforehand, that makes the life simple of you. And if it is documented also beforehand, that also makes life simple, because later on patient forget all these things, and then you can tell them that this is what they,
forget. हमने बोला था आंख वीक है, लेकिन वो याद नहीं, ऐसा नहीं याद है मेरे को. They can put their hands up in front of the relatives despite you telling them.
So that is the proper counseling, and written counseling is very, very important to be done beforehand. But as you said rightly, that 15 years back, we have done so many multifocal IOLs, Restore IOL, and plus 3 diopters, so many varieties. There is no perfect lens in multifocal IOL till date we cannot. So this we have to explain to our patients, that there is something compromising, and the patients who have clear lens in other eye or very early cataract in other eye, for them it is very difficult to convince initially.
But I feel that things have changed a lot now. I feel that our IOL formulae and our optical biometry has knocked off that residual error component very significantly. Or the way we combine it with LRCS, or even a manual phaco, which we do with lot of understanding of it. So, and then we do check on the higher order aberration and on the corneal topography. When we do all of it, our end results are very good. I think I don't hear patients complaining much. I am going to be talking on that in the next talk. But the complaints are so far fewer than before. I think many general patients of ours are very happy with the Indian multifocals too. There are different ones which are so good. I think it's our emmetropic outcome which you are having now has a main role to play. Dr. Savda, you could start sharing your screen and give your talk.
Thank you, Chitra.
Bye, welcome to the show.
Thank you, sir.
Welcome.
Good evening, sir. Good evening, Dr. Savda.
Really, congratulations to all of you. You're doing such a wonderful job that I started retiring and taking a back seat. So please continue waving the flag and keep teaching as you're doing. You guys are wonderful teachers. So I have the financial interest in Alcon that I get research grant, but there's no financial interest in this presentation. I think we heard about
Could you share your screen?
Oh,
you forgot.
So I did, yes. So how do I do this? Okay, I know. Share my screen. Okay, thank you, Chitra. Yeah, okay, can you see that? Yeah, yes. I think we heard about all the nitty-gritty of performing primary surgery, but performing the cataract surgery, irrespective of premium or otherwise, remains even more important here. So in reference to premium IOL patient, clear cornea day one is not enough anymore now. And we struggle to get that over the years. At least I struggle. But surely it is the starting point for premium cataract surgery, because then and then you will be able to pass on the benefits of these wonderful various options of intraocular lens that we have. So make sure that surgical strategy, the performance is safe, effective, and predictable, and customized to the type of eye, to the type of cataract. You may have to change your technique or IOL option, as you will hear from others, but performance on table also will have to be changed in these premium IOL surgeries. One could be different grades of cataracts, different environment, different supporting anatomy of the eye, and so on. So I just want to remind you that the 4-quadrant technique is still a very good option, and it's a very versatile technique. So depending upon the grade, do not hesitate to perform 4-quadrant surgery. You're not an inferior surgeon by doing that. So it is a very useful technique for many kinds of cataracts. But the cataract that many of us see that needs different kind of chop techniques, and there are various modification of direct chop, stop and chop techniques, and so on. Whatever you're familiar, you need to know more than one type, because you need to combine different kind of chop action and at different times. This is an example of direct chop, as you can see, and that's very efficient. in a dense cataract. But even then, you need to combine some of these different concepts. And this is one of them, that if you fail to separate, and total separation is very important in these leathery cataracts. This is one way of doing it, taking the probe out and re-impel and produce a vacuum seal at a plane closer to the bottom fibers. So you have to bury the probe twice or maybe 3 times, depending upon the cataract. And this video exemplifies that this is a pseudo exfoliation eye with a rupture and dislocated in the fellow eye, and was referred to us. So we want a minimal stress to the back. So I did initiate the crack, and now I'm going in the same plane, but a deeper plane, so that my chopper, which will be placed in the depth of the crack I initiated, will need minimal lateral separation. So that's the concept of multi-level chop technique, which you can adopt in whatever kind of chop action you have. But remember to go step by step and not aim at total division at one stroke like a karate or extreme lateral separation. One can easily initiate the crack in the periphery, but when it comes to the center, many times we end up doing so much of lateral separation. Instead, notice I went back again. I took the probe out and went into the depth, and then placing the chopper again into the depth, and I'm able to separate that more effectively with less lateral separation. So these kind of surgical techniques or concepts, and there are various techniques, and each of you have wonderful ideas about it. Make sure that it is safe, consistent, and predictable every time you perform. That was for the division, but more important now is to produce a clear cornea day one, and that's where from which plane you remove the cataract divided fragments becomes important, and lower parameters of infusion bottle height and aspiration flow rate and vacuum will allow you to work away from the cornea, closer to the posterior capsule, without fear of the rupture, because your flow rate is low, your vacuum is sufficient but not high, and your bottle height is not very high. And we reported in 2010 that doing that will produce a clearer cornea compared to the higher bottle height and higher flow rate. And now with the intraoperative OCT, we can confirm that. The video shows a very uneventful, smooth removal of that hard, dense cataract, but the OCT intraoperative is not very good. From time to time, when the lens fragment tumbles, you will notice that the fragment keeps coming in the view, and it is in the close vicinity of the fragment, because I'm using a very high flow rate and a lot of vacuum. So you need to keep it away from the cornea. That fragment should never appear in OCT. This is something very useful now with the premium IOL, because posterior capsule clarity and anti-capsule clarity and no fibrosis or less fibrosis is very important. Otherwise, it will defeat sometimes by decentration or producing opacification or visual obscuration. So the cortical aspiration suddenly has become very important, and I recognize the contribution of Dr. Viraj, who developed this technique a few years ago before she went out of function. So this cortical aspiration POPs technique, POPS, means positioning and all details. But the key is that at the moment, many of us, and I used to do that as a RUT, cortical aspiration, because it works out very well. I use high vacuum and flow rate, and with the radial pull, generally speaking, it works absolutely smoothly and in a very short time. But sometimes you develop PCO more and you're surprised. So this whole cortex removal has been segmented into different step-by-step steps. So first of the POPs is the positioning, the aspiration flow rate, aspiration port under the anterior cortex. First thing is to detach the anterior cortex from the anterior capsule before you go to the fornix. So you see the animation on the corner there. I'm positioning the aspiration port under the anterior cortex, and my aim is in this whole process is to detach the antecortex of the anticapsule. So second step logically would be to place this, take this and occlude. The second take will be to occlude the aspiration port by pressing the pedal and occlude the cortex. Once that cortex gets occluded, you can use this aspiration probe as a handle and then take that as occluded aspiration port and the probe posteriorly, and you see the animation. It's very difficult to see that in the video with the 3 dimension. That once I take the port and the probe down, the antecortex get detached of the anterior cortex, because the epithelium on the anterior capsule has a lot of and then we swipe instead of a radial pull, and that will take the cortex off the fornix. Dr. Alan Crandall, Liliana, and others have shown that swiping movement produces less stress on the zonules compared to the radial pull, but it also removes the fornix cortex more effectively. And this is done. And once that is done, you put your paddle more on the paddle and use your preset 300, 400 vacuum that you had. So this whole process of cortex removal has been fragmented by Viraj to make it more safe. But equally important is this, and Samresh has shown this, that if you put a radial pull, if you have a radial pull like this, you can detach the cortex of the fornix, leaving behind, sometimes, not always, most of the time it works very well, and therefore we don't have much residual fibers or epithelial cells, but you can leave behind those potentially PCO-forming epithelial cells. Instead, if you go gentle and swipe, having detached the cortex from the anterior capsule, you have more chance of detaching those potential epithelial cells harbored at the fornices. So I think that's one. And finally, with the femtosecond cataract surgery in the premium IOL, I think is a deadly combination. It's really easy, the steps of cataract surgery. It makes it very predictable and safer in beginner's hand, experience, and everybody's. And it not only uses in difficult situations, but even in the routine cataracts and in premium IOLs. It's so nice to see this flex surgery helping us to produce that dream situation, which is in the manual things many times. So finally, keep this attitude of learning lifelong and keep the patience. You will achieve and reach there like the excellent faculty that you have here. But remember, whatever you do, premium or otherwise, patients are at the heart of all that we need. Do not recommend multifocals or toric or whatever if they really don't need, and if you think they won't benefit for sake of our practice or other motives. So thank you so very much for patient hearing. Chitra, can I go back to my course?
I know. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Shall I go on to my talk?
Yes, ma'am.
I'll be talking on dealing with unhappy post-op premium IOL patients. And after my talk, maybe we could take on some questions till Ramurthy also joins in and takes on. Okay, so I'll share my screen. Oh, where did it go? Sorry. Very sorry. I don't know what happened. Are you able to? I don't know.
मैम स्क्रीन शेयर हो गया आपका?
नहीं स्क्रीन अभी करते हैं, वो मेरा प्रेजेंटेशन गायब हो गया था. Sorry, very sorry for what happened. So I shall be going on to discussing after After talking about what our patients want and how best we are going to surgically reach out to them, this is one section which we do need to reflect on, a small number of them, the 6 unhappy premium IOL patient. We need to understand that the way we stand today, this unhappy patient group is actually becoming a rarer group because patients are likely to recommend modern premium IOLs to their friends and family. And it was seen in Concerto study, there were 94% of them who would refer to their friends and 98% in the Harmony study. So what makes for an unhappy patient is maybe if you've had a surgical error, maybe there was something which was bothering him as far as his visual quality. But what becomes important for us that if we know our patient is unhappy, but he's seeing 6/6 well, we need to ferret out that problem and not be defensive or dismissive. Now, what is the problem we need to understand so that we can tackle it? Is it a lack of visual clarity, like some kind of a visual disturbance like a glare, halo, or starburst? That will guide us to how to deal with it. Is it a lack of clarity for distance and near, which will tell us how to treat it? Or is it that the patient was fine the initial period of months, but only recently has a lack of clarity that takes us on to a different track? So what becomes necessary is, besides doing a thorough refraction, we need to address the ocular surface, the tear film, whether the IOL is centered, whether the pupil is all right, whether there's a PCO, is the macula all right? So we need to trace the path entirely. And if after operating on the first eye, we feel that the patient is not too happy, we have to go slow as far as implanting in the other eye. Now, if I take you to some simple examples, like this is a patient who underwent an LRCS with Symphony multifocal. And if you would see that his intermediate vision was clear, but he was not happy with his near vision. So this is something easily treatable, that all we could do is go in for a high-powered, like a Technics +4 in the other eye, and that took care of his vision, and he actually became a very happy patient with the combination of therapy. Now, again, a patient has undergone LRCS with Symphony in his right eye. If you look carefully, he's again happy with his near vision, but has a 0.5 residual for near. That is, he needs that 0.5 add. That's a very simple solution, because all we need to do is just a micro monovision. That is, we could target the left eye with a minus 0.75 diopter. That extra myopia will compensate for that defective near vision, and he would be quite sorted out and a happy patient. Now, this is another patient who underwent one of the Indian multifocals, was not able to get an optimal near vision. As you can see, his distance was all right. But if we actually go ahead and in that kind of a situation, implant a different company lens, and he found that he did well. It was, what was the difference? Was it the IOL design was not optimal, or was it there was some residual refractive error which was not looked into? Again, if you go in for the most optimal lens as this, or you go in for the best of the IOL formulas and the calculation and have had no error, you would get 6/6 vision for distance, intermediate, and near. But what are the burgeoning challenges to visual blur? It could be something sitting on the ocular surface, a pre-existent dry eye disease which was not addressed or which got triggered by cataract surgery. There have been lessons learned from the FACO study, which says that there are 60% of our routine cataract patients actually were asymptomatic, but more than 60% had a tear breakup time of less than 5 seconds. There were 80% of them with corneal staining. There were 18% with a Schirmer score of less than 5, and we could have overlooked all these eyes. There are certain problems which happen with the cataract surgery, like a corneal nerve transection, the prolonged exposure to microscope light, prolonged phaco time, or those post-op eye drops which we might rarely shower on them. All of this would lead on to a local ocular surface inflammation that would trigger a goblet cell loss. And if the patient has a meibomian gland dysfunction, that would get added on and it would perpetuate. So then what happens is that the post-op medications should be lessened. If that is something which is in our hands, we could do that, or we could treat the dry eye status completely, either with medication or a treatment for the MGD with Vilipiflow, reassure the patient and take the measurements and then take them up for the thing. If they're in our setup, we put them on low-strength topical steroid drops, which we rapidly taper off, keep them on some non-steroidal drops, keep them on lubricants. Actually, I keep my patients on lubricants even for a couple of months beyond the surgery. You could do a meibomian gland study, show to them, look at the capillary gland dropouts which are there. Would it just suffice doing a local massage, or would you allow us to go ahead and do a LipiFlow treatment? You can't promise a lifetime of happiness, but definitely it would allow them to get treated better and undergo a good surgery. The visual disturbances could be a dysphotopsia, a decentered IOL, or a higher order aberration. As far as dysphotopsia is concerned, the commonly known ones are the positive and the negative dysphotopsia, or the entoptic phenomenon. Now, what is that? You have removed the large cataractous lens and placed an IOL in the eye. There is a lot of space in the posterior segment, and this kind of extra space can create this peripheral vitreous traction or an arcuate flash or something which are not very significant. The positive dysphotopsia are the glare, the halo, the starbursts are kind of things which patients complain of. The negative ones is a temporal shadow which they see in the nasal side, temporal side. So then, why do we get this dysphotopsia? A very basic explanation. The multifocal IOLs work on the principles of simultaneous vision. That is, when one image is in focus, the other out of focus image is getting suppressed. And it is this suppressed image which is the cause for the halos. Again, we need to know that no visual system is multifocal in any mammal. Rather, what we need to do is to choose an IOL which allows a more physiological division of light. So what is it? Why is it you get positive dysphotopsia? It could be because of these modern lenses with the square-edged IOLs or those high refractive index IOLs which come. And some milder ones could be treated by doing a bilateral implantation, explaining to the patient that neurally, with time, in a tincture of time, you would adapt. And what you'll find, it's the younger patients adapt faster, but majority of the older patients also adapt by period of 3 months to 1 year. While you're so fixed on positive dysphotopsia, you should rule out things like, was there a residual refractive error? Was there an ocular surface disease? Is the IOL centered? Is there a mild PCO which needs to be treated? And very rarely, patient may be so distressed that you should be ready for an IOL exchange. The negative dysphotopsia is seen about from 0 to 15%, a dark shadow in the temporal visual field. And again, the etiology is elusive, but also multifactorial. It could be because of the IOL design or material, again, high refractive index, again, a truncated edge of the design. It could be simple things like the capsular margin coming on the nasal side of the IOL, which could be hindered. There could be light reflecting off the edge and off the IOL surface. It could be because of the distance between the IOL and the iris is small. It could be seen in small eyes with small pupils. It could be seen. What happens exactly is the light which is reflected off the posterior surface of the IOL to that which is reflected off from the edge of the IOL. Difference, because of which there could be this glare. So how could you deal with it? I would need a little extra time. Is either by sulcus, you could place a piggy bag IOL, that might solve it. Or you could bring out the optic of the IOL from the capsular bag out if the rhexis allows, which is a reverse optic capture. Rarely it has been said that a nasal capsulectomy is done or an IOL exchange. IOL decentration, the other issue, you can very well see that the rings are eccentrically seen, and whereas in this left side of the figure, the optic is well centered. So what happens, it's important that the geometric center and the pupillary center and the line of visual axis should all be as close to each other as possible. And it's also very important that the first Purkinje effect on the anterior surface of the cornea to that on the fourth Purkinje reflex should be well aligned. But these kind of problems are not much with the modern IOLs, which have a larger optic. If you look down, the PanOptix has more than 1.1 and Symphony has 1.6. So in these cases, even if your angle alpha is about 0.7 or more, there is not going to be much of a disturbance in these eyes which have a large central optic. Besides, the configuration of the modern multifocal IOLs, which ensures that the haptic configuration is set that it stretches well in the capsular bag, or if you do a femtocataract, if you size your rhexis to the capsular bag, in these kind of situations, you are quite optimal. The reasons why you may have an asymmetric bag contracture is if your rhexis overlap is not good, if the IOL is not centered the way I said it, So, or if the IOL, there is a bag laxity, the zonules are weak, or a large angle kappa, or a hyperopic patient, these are the situations. Now, this patient had a significant mixed astigmatism kind of situation, but when you looked at him, dilated his pupil, you realized his zonules are weak, and a placement of CTR was all that was needed for him, and he became all right. Now, if you look at this eye trace, there are hardly any aberrations on the cornea, but if you look at the internal optics, you notice that there is a lot of abrasions. So it clearly tells you that the intraocular lens is to blame. And in these kind of patients, if you're not able to address the problem, IOL exchange may be a solution. Sometimes you need to look at the posterior capsule, even a wrinkling of the capsule or a minimal PCO could be having a massive visual impact. So you need to wait for 3 months, of course, and do a cruciate YAG capsulotomy in these patients. But there may be some patients who have a small PC plaque and are happy. You don't go bothering them. You just let them be because they are happy. Sometimes if the vision is not improving, you actually need to concentrate on their OCT. It could be a vitreomacular traction, a diabetic macular edema, a CME, or an ERM, or a lamellar macular hole which has got missed out, which needs to be addressed. In other words, you might do a good surgery. You might have chosen the wrong patient. You need to tell your patients that the intraocular lenses come in certain sizes, and we try our best to best fit, but you might need a laser vision correction up in the end. We need to be very responsive and reassure our patients. Believe me, planning for the worst before the surgery would do the best after the surgery. In other words, you need to understand the visual needs. You have a range of IOLs now. You have the low ad, the high ad, we have the extended depth of focus, we have the trifocals. So if you do a careful biometry, choose the right formula, do the right surgery, you are doing fine. And if a patient is 6'6" and is 6'9", he's 6'6" happy, which means he has a residual error, but he's happy. You don't have to go running after him to correct those refractive errors, because the final end result is a happy 6'6" patient. So essentially, the essence of my talk is that we need to go in a very methodical, conceptualized approach, so that we try to understand what is the problem we are facing and rise to those challenges. Believe me, the multifocals today are so good that these temporary issues could be easily sorted out, and we could have a larger section of our patients wanting a multifocal IOL and a very small section of patients who would actually have a problem in future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chitra, for that wonderful presentation. I joined midway because I had another commitment. Purendra, Himanshu, any comments before we go on to the last talk?
I think let us finish the talks first, because that is, otherwise we'll lose. And at the end of the session, we may take some question.
Perfect, perfect. So I think we have had extensive discussions. I'm sure all aspects of premium cataract surgery has been covered, but it's nothing is worthwhile if you cannot market it. And the last aspect that we are going to do is to how to ethically market this product, this wonderful product, and how to benefit, ensure that the patients and we benefit out of it. So it's not as if we have a very small base of customers who can offer these premium intraocular lens products. In 2015, it was thought that the population about 250,000 middle class, and in 2025, it estimated it might be about 550 million. Maybe the corona would set back the timelines a little bit, but I'm sure we are going to bounce back. Many of these patients are paying 60,000-70,000 rupees for the appendicectomy in a good hospital, and definitely they can spend this kind of money for the cataract surgery. Holidays, cars, mobiles, jewelry, eating out, conferences. People have the money to spend on this. Why can't they spend it on something that they need primarily to enjoy all these aspects, that is vision? So as far as you have the confidence, you have the ability to offer them the best of vision, and you promise them that, most often they would be takers for this. My experience with premium surgery happened almost 3 decades back when I was just starting out my practice. And this was a mother of the local collector, district collector, and they're the biggest people for a small district like Tirupur, where I started my practice. She was wearing -18, -20 doctors all along. And all I did was an intracapsular cataract extraction in both the eyes, all the time praying that I do not get a vitreous loss. Fortunately, things went well, and this lady was absolutely thrilled. She could get rid of her glasses. She said, "I've never seen anything like this all my life." I myself could not understand why she was so happy, because the concept of getting rid of glasses and all was just not there at that time. But anyway, there's a lot of collateral advantage that I derived out of this initial experience. Fortunately, these collectors don't last in the same place too long. So she went away. I do not know what happened to her retina later on, but at least immediately she got an extremely positive positive results and a positive feedback for me. And obviously, the reason I'm telling this is when you do premium intraocular lens, offer premium outcomes, it's going to have a very positive impact on your overall practice volumes also. The secret of life is honesty and fair dealing. Let me tell you, there is no multifocal intraocular lens which doesn't come without a certain amount of compromise as far as dysphotopsia is concerned. We buy vision for all distances using the currency of contrast. Basically, the amount of currency that we use might be a little less as we advance with our technology, but there is a price to pay. And that's the reason you have to counsel these patients, set their expectations right, let them know whatever you know about those lenses, what is relevant to them. At the same time, do not get into this mess about too much information syndrome. If you start talking to them from PMMA intraocular lenses to LRCS with toric multifocals, they're going to listen to all of it and go elsewhere for their surgery. So in the initial conversation itself, I encourage my counselors to get to know as to what exactly this patient is looking for and try to orient their entire counseling towards that. They're just not interested in multifocals. They're very happy with the glasses. They say, we hardly read, we cannot afford it. Then, okay, we'll give them an excellent vision and give them a pair of glasses. But then if they are interested in a patient for a multifocal lenses, I would rather spend my time on deciding whether it's going to be a trifocal, a multifocal, or a multifocal toric or a synergy. And just in case they're not fit for anything, then downgrade them to a monofocal intraocular lens. This is something that we should realize, and we must make our patients also realize. Whenever a patient comes to me wanting the best of lenses and tells me that, can you give me a significant reduction? I always tell them that you are paying for the price of the technology, price of the kind of service and the surgery that's being offered to you. Just in case you can't afford it, please downgrade yourself. Let me tell you, that does not mean that I'm not cognizant of the fact that we need to serve the poorer sections of the society. We have a full charitable hospital devoted to this. In my hospital, cost of a surgery, cataract surgery, costs anything from 0 to 1,75,000 rupees. So depending upon what the patient's requirements are and what their ability to pay for it is concerned, we slot them in. Obviously, we don't never say, it's never a rude no. Just because they're asking, we may offer a 3,000, 4,000 rupee concession. But in case they are expecting something more, we tell them, why not go for a slightly lesser quality lens or a lesser quality technology, and this is also going to work quite well for you. It's extremely important that you analyze your results more than listening to these talks, reading papers. Once you look at your own results, that will give you a great idea. We have this habit of looking at our own results every week. Every surgeon gets an analysis of his intraocular lens outcome results. This is what I saw in 2006. This is a single day surgery for me. And as you can see over here, presbyopia is not even concerned. 2.75 is given to all patients. But you find that -2, -1.75, 0.75, etc. I was using a contact A scan and SRKT formula in those days. And this was perfectly acceptable results for me at that time, simply because the patient got good best corrected visual acuity. Come over to 2015 when I switched over to IOL Master 500, Holiday 2, the Varion, etc. Then again, near vision was less of a concern. I had already started using multifocal intraocular lenses. About 2 to 3% of, maybe 5% of my patients were getting that. As far as the uncorrected visual acuity for distance was good, then I was happy. The patients were also tailor-made to accept that. And when it come over to March 2021, when we did have a good volume of patients, one day surgical list of mine, as you can see over here, we still have a certain number of aspheric intraocular lenses being implanted, but majority of them go for multifocals, trifocals, etc. And what you find is that the uncorrected near visual acuity, intermediate visual acuity, distance visual acuity, along with the quality of vision does matter. And you owe it to your patients, those who are demanding it, to have the wherewithal to satisfy their needs, and it's possible to satisfy their needs today. We have also made simple alterations like this. We want to mimic the real world. There used to be a glasses over here. There used to be a light over here. We are completely done away with that in all our refractive lanes, because we essentially want to mimic what the patient is going to experience in the real life. So it's a book over here. There's a cell phone over here. The lady is asked to go through both of them and see whether she's quite comfortable to do that. Also, I always believe that having a third option is a great idea. Most often I remember the olden days when we used to have a first class, second class, and the third class in trains. Maybe we could not afford the first class, but we often used to go by the second class. Similarly, when we had just the Plano scan LASIK, it was always that. When the optics came up, there are not too many takers for that. When we brought in the femtosecond platform, then not only did our femtosecond numbers increase, but most of the patients went on to Xioptics, because they felt that if we cannot go for the higher end procedure, let me at least go for the second category. So that's the reason I find that having multiple options, our cost for a Indian multifocal intraocular lenses, which I think several good options are available today, is just slightly more than a imported toric intraocular lens. And just in case the patient wants to go for a lower option, but at the same time is interested in multifocality, we do not hesitate to offer them that. I believe this is a very important message, in that neither be the last person to adapt a technology, nor be the first person, because the technology has to mature. Today, I believe the multifocal and toric technology has completely matured. I think it's most important for us to realize that we are competing within ourselves. I showed you my own statistics of what I was doing in 2016, 15, and 21. I have no control over what is happening around me, what are the other hospitals doing, what machines they're acquiring, how excellent their surgeries are. What I am trying to aim at is improving my outcomes on a day-to-day basis. And as far as cataract surgery is concerned, offering premium cataract surgery is a great way to go. I think I'll skip this because I'm running out of time. That's just one way of making sure that my patients who have a complaint, I put a -2 diopter lens in front of them and tell them that if you have a little bit of dysphotopsia, what you are gaining is by near vision is extremely high. Always be an ally to the patient. When a patient comes to you with a complaint, it's extremely important that every patient of yours is satisfied, because if he or she is going around bad-mouthing you, she's going to not just keep multifocal patients away from you, but even monofocals, even a refractive error patients are going to stay away. So whenever a patient comes to you with a complaint, it's more of an observation. As far as you reassure them, tell them you can understand what their problem is, it's going to go away with time, and give them the confidence that you can handle it. They are going to accept it and stay with you. It's important that the multifocal lens is not just the lens that you're implanting. It has to be a great experience right through the procedure, right from the time of entry to the time of exit. It's not just the patient who matters, but the attendant also matters. It's not the 8 minutes that they spend under the operating microscope, but it's the entire experience which makes a difference. We have a significant number of patients coming into one of our centers from the Gulf, and here we have made a provision for a prayer room. And that is something which is very much appreciated by the patients. I think some of those patients choose our hospital just because this provision is there. So you have to meet their expectations. I believe premium products is win-win for all. It's enhancing outcomes for the patient, enhancing the skill sets of the patient and income for the physician. Once we started doing refractive surgery, we started realizing the importance of refractive accuracy in our cataract surgery patients also. And obviously, because they are doing innovative technology, it's enhanced turnover. So remember, is the procedure that's a premium. It's not the intraocular lens. It's not the surgeon. It's not the technology. It's the entire process that's premium. As far as you understand that and market it right, you will have an extremely good ride with this. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Your talk was very good, but I think I'll have to go to my instruction course now, so I won't be there for your discussion. Anyway, you all don't have more than 5 minutes discussion.
So one question, Dr. Chitra.
Yes, ask me.
Because before you leave, so you were saying that 6/6 vision and still unhappy. That was the talk. But sometimes you do find that even without any reason, patients complain initially. That is what is seen because they are quite apprehensive in the initial period.
No, I think now only we have become very sensitized to looking right from the whether IOL is centered, what is the dry eye status, all that I said. If we start looking for it, there'll be something which will fall into something. At least dysphotopsia symptom which is there, which they are not able to express. It cannot be that they just randomly, our regular cataract patients are not complaining, no. So if these people, and I somehow feel, I don't know, in our population lot, the number of that kind of complaints has totally disappeared. It's not there, very few. And they have a reason for that. So I think if we address that, the reason for displeasure in multifocal IOLs, we have an answer. Some of them are treatable, some of them will neural adaptation would occur.
So what is your post-operative drops regimen?
Post-operatively, actually, earlier we were even different. We used to keep them on steroid antibiotic drops, steroid drops only for a couple of weeks, and then continue them with non-steroidal drops, and artificial tears I would continue for nearly 2-3 months with like artificial tear lubricant ointment at night. Now we have gone back to low dose steroid drops, which is tapered over 1 month, with antibiotic drops for 1 week and non-steroidal drops for 6 weeks and artificial tears.
All right. Sorry to interrupt, Doctor. Now, so we are already out of time. And
yeah. Okay. Thank you. Thanks a lot. We'll be in touch.
Thank
I'll
you.
take up this topic in our webinars. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Ramamurthy.
Thank you much.
And it was a beautiful course and beautiful talks by you and Dr. Himanshu. Very nice. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I also like to take this opportunity to thank all the doctors for being here. Thank you very much.